Um, All right, so as we introduced last webinar on transactions, we introduced folks to the concept of projects. So I've just opened up a project page. Projects are a special Arctos feature that allows tracking data usage, linking to Arctos assets, and basically serves as a handy aggregator web page for any and all related Arctos specimens and derivative data like media and publications. And we have found them to be extremely useful and flexible tools for data sharing. And we'll give you some specific examples of how you could start using projects too. But the whole why do we have projects and why use Arctos projects? It's because of that special feature of providing a centralized place for all the Arctos data sets that you may want to reference for a given study or for a specific set of specimens that are the results of a specific survey effort. And all of this is on one page, not, that's easy to find, so there's no searching involved. These links are dynamic, so they're always kept up to date. And basically, projects make your life as a curator easier. So it makes it easier because you have an easier time of reporting, finding data in publications, and loans. So let me just walk you through some of the components of a project. So there is a project title. This is editable. I don't know if you can see my my cursor here, but there might be a little bit of pointing with my cursor. So let me
We
know
can
if you
see
have
your
trouble
cursor.
seeing this. Okay, great. So we have the title. There is a list of the PIs or co-PIs or other graduate students or any other personnel that's associated with the project. This is also editable. We have date ranges, a start and an end date. We have a basic description. This description is actually enabled through a very simple to write code called Markdown, which basically allows you to write HTML code without really needing to know any HTML coding. We also have links in your curatorial editing interface that basically gives you the markdown tips and notations that are useful to use. So you can have things hyperlinked to outside resources or to other Arctos projects. Basically, whatever you want to write here can be displayed. And in this case, we even have a little bit of formatting with bullet points. And that's all enabled through this Markdown. We also have links to field notes and other external websites. Another part of the project is the specimens that are being used. So these are basically related through some kind of Arctos transaction. This transaction may be a loan or maybe an accession, or perhaps both. We also have specimens contributed, which may be specimens that are that were used in the project, and we also have projects that are sharing specimens. They have specimens in common with them. More importantly, we have also a section where other projects can be linked through these specimen relationships, or they may be linked more directly through publications, which we will see in a little while over publications and citations of specimens. So these are all generated sort of dynamically, and they do not need to be directly associated, though they can be. We also have a way of linking relevant media. So in this case, we have a bunch of historic images that were taken during this historic survey. So all of these media are related directly to this project, and then they show up here in this related block of media. The media could be images, audio files, video, and other digital formats. Anything that can be associated as a media can be displayed down here. So these are the basic components of a project. I'll give you one more example of a project which actually I think has been referenced before in earlier webinars. And you can see here that in this one, this is actually a project that was not created by MVZ. But I can see this because I'm not logged in right now, so I can see all the different components for it. I mean, I can see this also if I am logged in, but I may not be able to see all the elements that I would have specific control over. So in this instance, I see that there's been publications associated with this project, as well as other media. In these cases, these were slides. So the other component of a project I'll point out to you. Let me know if you have trouble seeing this part. But at the top here in my browser window, you can see that the URLs is formed from the project title right here. So that provides a fairly stable-ish, as long as you don't edit the title, a stable URL that can be referenced and linked from other project websites or sent to administrators, for instance. How you can find projects. We have a special project and publication search page. You can find that under the Search tab. This is our default window, and here's under Publications and Projects. Leads you to this page right here. And so you can see that you can type in partial titles. I can type in Grinnell, for instance, and I can constrain it with particular years, or maybe I want to look for a PI that I can limit to a specific agent role. But in this case, I'm just going to search for any project with the or publication with the title that includes the word Grinnell. And that will give me, here we go. Actually, I have them also preloaded here. A number of different projects, which shows this common term Grinnell in the project titles. So you can see we have a number of Grinnell resurvey projects as well as historic Grinnell projects. And then we also have publications that are related to this. Of course, since it's a simple search page, it's not necessarily relevant to Joseph Grinnell. Some of these are related to other forms of Grinnell. But it does show some of his own publications as well. And I also want to point out that we have, because projects are a special sort of Arctos feature, not normally found in a lot of collection management tools, we have some special documentation in our handbook that's dedicated to projects. We kind of walk you through the different components. So that's our general documentation, and then we also have some that are related to specific features, you know, different kinds of usages. And we'll be working on some of these extra components of the handbook that walk you through the project as well. So I'm going to turn this over in just a little while to John, who'll walk us through publications and citations and how to add those to your project, and then we'll see the editing interface of projects as well. But I do want to reference quickly data loans. Data loans, as I mentioned in the last webinar, which I would refer you to if you need a refresher, are a very handy way of creating specific sets of specimens related to projects. So I'll just give you a specific example here where a data loan was necessary to relate to this historic Grinnell survey, because the accessions that were related to this survey actually included a lot of incidental road kills that were not related to the Death Valley National Park survey. So a data loan was necessary to constrain it just to the Death Valley National Park transect, and then those were in turn associated and allowed us to associate the data loan to the specific project. And so then these are now linked only to the transects for this project. So if there's any quick questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will turn it over to John. Any questions?
Thanks, Michelle. I think Carol has a good question. I think we should come back to at the end about, actually, maybe no, because we're looking at this page now. Let's talk about it now. So Carol wanted to know, do the photographs, the media associated with the specimens on this project, is that associated, are those media also associated with the specimens attached to this project? Does that question make sense? Like, if you went to one of the specimens?
No, I'm not sure.
If you went to one of the specimens that's included in this project, would, say, the image of the kit fox show up, or only if that specimen was associated with a collecting event?
I see. Right. Yeah. So in this case, it would be associated because we have all the collecting events related through our specimen, through the data loan. So I believe that those other collecting events would be associated with this, the media associated with those collecting events would be associated with this. We've also specifically tagged each one of these media with the project, with this specific project, because not all of the media were properly georeferenced. So we maybe didn't have collecting event sort of georeferences rather that were associated with the specimen. They didn't have the same level of detail, so I couldn't rely on just that. But for the ones that we did georeference and associated with the same collecting event as a specimen, then those would show up.
Cool.
Does that make sense? So
yeah, I think for any.
Yeah, that's a good question. It sort of depends, I suppose. Sometimes collecting events for the images are not in the same, don't actually share the exact same collecting event because the days may be slightly off or the location is slightly off than the specimen.
Thank you. And Mariel and Carla are adding a few comments. I think for anyone in the audience that is a little less familiar with Arctos, the bottom line is there are a lot of different ways to associate different things within Arctos, and projects is kind of a really flexible way to kind of group those into something more meaningful. If you're interested more in how media get associated with collecting events or specimens, that's kind of a separate topic, and we will do a webinar on media in the future. But at this point,
that's a good point, though, that there is more than one way of associating the media to a project.
Yeah.
So we're going to over now to
transfer to John Dunnum at Museum of Southwestern Biology. So he is going to give us an overview of publications and citations and how those are used in Arctos. So John, yeah, you got it.
Okay, we good? Can you hear us?
We're good. You sound good. You look good.
Excellent. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. So, while projects kind of allow us to pull everything together. In terms of that initial specimen linkage, publications are like the best way to link specimens to the actual science that's being done. And so documenting specimen use is a really critical aspect of not only collection management, but it enables us to really show the value to administrators or funders. It basically gives us a metric that we can use, and that's very critical for museums across the board. So in terms of creating publications, I'm going to work through just a really quick demo of how we do that. And so you can start in your default search screen and just go into the same place we were for the project search. And once you're here, you can just hit new publication, and it'll take you to this site here. And it's due to us having to make the screens a little bit larger, it's a little bit funky looking, but this is what you'll see. And so there's a couple ways that we create publications. You can do it manually, so if you've got all the information, you can hand type it all in. If you've got a DOI, it's much easier, and that's one of the great strengths in Arctos, is we can link out to all different other databases and such, and so DOIs work really well. So I'm just going to take one that I already know here, and I'm going to bring it in and hit cross-reference, and it'll bring that in, and it will pop everything in there that you need to start your publication creation, okay? And then the other really cool thing is if you have all of your agents already in Arctos, okay, you can actually pick them. Okay, so for the lead author, Shannon O'Brien, I know she's in there, but she's not coming up here, so I can just quickly try that and see what comes up, and Shannon comes up, and so I can populate that. Okay, I know Joe is the one I'm looking for, and I know Seth is the one I'm looking for. So now I've populated that and added those agents. Now we're moving slowly but surely. But it's very straightforward, and there, we're good. So we in that short of time, we have created a publication, and that publication is now ready for anything else we might want to add to it. Okay, so whether that's media or adding, actually going in and adding specimens, it's ready to go. Quickly see now that DOI is attached, you can link out to the paper as well. Okay. Okay, so that's ready to go. It would take too long for me to actually manually add specimens right now during a demo, so we're not going to do it that way. But what I'm going to do is go to our search page, and I'm going to show you what it looks like coming in from an actual specimen. So a specimen that is cited in publications, and so we'll kind of go that route. Sorry. Okay, we're freezing up here. It's our institutional Wi-Fi at its best here, sorry. Okay, so we're going to go into this specimen record. Okay, now this is a really cool specimen, and we use it for a number of different examples because this is an individual specimen that has been, at last count, used in like 27 different publications. Okay, and it's really critical because there are some specimens out there that, once something's been submitted to GenBank, for example, those sequences are out there and they get used over and over again. So it really brings to light the critical aspect of tying these things back to a real record, because this material goes on and gets used over and over again. And so tracking that is really, really critical. Okay, so when you add a specimen to a paper, you get the power to document, one, if there were identification changes, or in this case there aren't, but if there was a revision or taxonomy has changed, or whatever that paper gave us, we can include that here. So you get the full history of the specimen. You can always go back to it. It also allows us to see what the nature of the identification was, or how that specimen was used. So initially in this paper it was a type specimen, but then subsequent papers using molecular data, it was basically a voucher for whatever systematic work it was being used for in this case. Okay, and so you can go into each one of these and see specifics about the individual paper that provided these data. Okay, now we can actually also go into the papers themselves and work with the citations that paper had. So this paper by Sid Anderson, Terry Yates in 2000, and this gives you everything you need to then work with that publication. Okay, so there were 10 different cited specimens in there. Okay, and so you can see all the specimens that were there, and you can see, okay, this is a voucher, this is a paratype, and you can see all the pertinent information for the specimens that were included in that paper. Identification, that'll show you basically the same thing, but if there were changes, that might be a place where you'd want to go to see where things have been changed through time. Okay, so this says there's no DOI for this paper. Okay, so, well, this gives me the option if, so this was entered quite a while ago, I guess, and someone probably entered this one manually. Well, so now I can go in and I can update this and edit my record and pull a DOI. Okay, I'm going to use this one and save it, and so it updates the record. So you can go in and you can continually modify these as more information comes to light. Okay. Okay, so the next thing you can then do is you can go in and you can manage your citations. And so this is where if you have the paper in hand and you want to start adding citations, this is where you would do it. And if it's just got a few citations, it doesn't take too long to go through and manually enter them here. And so what you would end up doing is you have your paper in hand and you've got a host of different choices as to what the specimen is in that paper. You can select those, you can add the page number, any kind of remarks you would like. Then you can go and find the specimen, right? So, whatever it may be. Okay. Let me pull up my own so I know. Okay, so then you just select the specimen and pop it in there and you're good to go. And then now you have the option of do you want to use whatever identification is in Arctos now, or do you want to update it with something new? Like if this is a revision or a taxonomic change of some sort, this is where that information goes in. So you have all this great metadata associated with each one of these citations. Okay. So that's if you're adding new stuff. Okay, this one already has it. And so here you have the option again of going in and editing anything that's already been entered. Okay, oftentimes things aren't cited as the museum specimen. Potentially they're cited as something else, maybe a field number, or in our case an NK number, a tissue number. And these are all numbers that can then be tied to not only our specimen record, but original field notes, any kind of media we may want to do, and as well as link back to the original text in a paper. Okay, so that's the quick and dirty way to get in if you've only got a few specimens. Oftentimes we've got many specimens that are associated in some of these papers, and manually entering it takes way too long. And in that case, we can use the citation bulk loader. Again, this is not going to be very clear on this enlarged screen, but basically it's you can get a template, and you can enter all the different citations in an easy manner, and you can load them all in at once. And so this will probably be a good thing that maybe Erica can speak to when she talks about bulk loading, because it's not very clear on this one here. But basically, you're just generating a CSV file and uploading. All right. So that's the quick and dirty on publications and citations. So now I think what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of open it up. Mariel's going to give an overview of different uses of projects and how you can tie things like loans and accessions to projects. And then, then the last bit, then ask questions on any of these three topics, and we will just go through some examples. Okay?
Thank you, John. Before we move over to Mariel, Beth had a good question. She wanted to know, so the authors on a publication in Arctos are always listed in the citation itself. Is it worthwhile to add those authors as Arctos agents in addition, even if they're just an author on a publication? Is that?
We've gone back and forth about that, actually, and at one point we decided to do full information for the lead author minimally, so that every publication had full information for it. Otherwise, you're just putting in names, basically. So we don't have a definitive on that, but it's a great point of discussion for a working group, actually.
If you,
I'd just like to make
go ahead, Mariel.
on that. Sorry, in that if you do enter them as agents, then Arctos does a great job of tracking different publications associated with an agent. For example, this paper has Sydney Anderson, and if we were to go to the agents and look up Sydney Anderson and go to his profile, then it would allow us to see the, let me scooch this over a little bit, agent activity report. So every agent in Arctos, you can see what all of the specimens and publications, etc., that they're associated with. So here are his publications. So if you have somebody who's actively working in Arctos, who's going to have a lot of publications that you want to be able to track, or have a lot of loans, perhaps. Maybe they're not an Arctos operator, but you're going to be issuing a bunch of loans to that person. You may want to enter them as an agent in Arctos so that then you can track all this in one place through their agent profile.
Yeah, I'll add one other thing about Arctos agents, because I often find that now that we're sharing agents, that if it's someone who's fairly active in their discipline, they may already be in Arctos. So it's always worth checking, because they may just be more active in a different collection. So it's always worth checking, especially if, like I said, they're a fairly active author.
Right. So I mean that's one of the powers of Arctos, right? Is that relational aspect and the ability to to do things across the board. And so that's all dependent on the quality of the data that go in. And so it's always better to spend the time and create quality agents, quality whatever, and add everything you possibly can. It's just in some cases, if you're loading hundreds and hundreds of papers, maybe you've got to just get them in quickly, for example, and so it makes more sense to just put in a single agent for each one or something, and then as you have time, go back and re-edit and clean up those papers or whatever.
Are there any other questions on that?
Carla has a suggestion that we should add some documentation to the handbook for using the citation bulk loader, which I would agree with, and handbooks always work in progress. I think that was great, John, and it sounds like we answered Beth's question. So I say take it away, Mariel.
Great. Hi, everybody. So that's actually a good segue into accessions and loans, because I, as a collection manager for genomic resources, I issue a lot of loans. And one of the things that I do every time I create a loan is to make sure that I create the agents for that loan in Arctos. And these are people, maybe other institutions, but by creating them as an agent, then I can link any subsequent publications that come out of that loan to their specific agent names, and it's a very useful tool. I can also kind of track whether they've returned things, et cetera, et cetera. So let me just go. I'm going to be giving my demo using the Arctos test database, which is really nice because I'm going to create an accession and a loan, and I don't really want to do this on our main database, but the test database allows us to play around with different tools as we're testing them out and see if they work, and it also is a good learning tool as well. So I'm logged into the test database, and if I want to create an accession, start with accessions and go with loans, I go down here to Manage Data and Transactions. And again, to see all these different tabs, you have to have access as an operator, and you have to have permissions for this collection. So I'm logged in, I have permissions to do transactions. I go here to Transactions, and I go to Create Accession, which will take me to this page here. And I have access to a number of different collections through genomic resources. I'm just going to pick DGR mammals. Arctos provides a number of suggestions here for the next number, however you want to number your accessions. Again, accession means we take legal responsibility for an incoming group of specimens. So I'm just going to give it this one, give it today's date. Nature of material is incoming specimens. And I'm going to put, I'm going to say this is Mexican wolf. And these fields are searchable. So anything you might want to search an accession for, any text you would want to put in here, it's always better to have at least 100 characters in your nature of your description. And down here under Receive From, this is an agent. So if I click on it, the tab, it'll bring up a different possible agents. I could also put in, we have the Mexican Wolf Recovery Program. So anyway, it allows me to autofill these pretty easily through tab. We have a repository agreement with them, so I'll click that. And now I'm going to save this accession. Once I do this, now I can scan in barcodes of specimens that we've had, and I get a specimen list once things are cataloged. But over here on the right is the place for projects. Now, I always link a project to an accession when I know I'm going to be having more than one accession repeatedly coming through for particular stuff, or any other reason why I might have a project linked to this. That doesn't have to always have a project, but you have the option. And in this case, again, I'm going to type Mexican Wolf, hit tab. These are the possible projects that I would have. I'm going to pick a Mexican Wolf Recovery Program. Also notice you can add a permit here if there's permits required. And I'm going to save changes. Now, having done that, I can check my project. There's a direct link here, and I can go look at this one. This is we get multiple accessions from Fish and Wildlife Service because we're the repository for the blood and tissue samples collected from this endangered species recovery program from multiple zoos across the country. So here's this edit. This is the detail page, which allows me to edit the text. Again, please note a minimum of 100 characters to show up in search. If you don't have 100 characters, you won't be able to find this project under the search page here, so that's really important to put some text and information in there. That's because we don't want minimal information in the project. We want enough to know what's going on. And then as you scroll down, you see the agents that are associated with this project and all of our accessions. This is where projects become very, very useful because you can see we have a huge number of accessions. And when we do our reporting to Fish and Wildlife Service as to all the specimens, I would like to be able to tell them what specimens we have, which accession, etc. And down at the bottom, you can add publications as well. And we've had a hard time getting them to give us publications to track for this project. Then you can also go to the detail page here, which is the public view. So what we've been looking at here is what I see as a logged-in operator. The detail page is the public view. Then this is the link that Michelle was talking about that you could give to administrators or to, in this case, program coordinators at the Fish and Wildlife Service, and this shows you the specimens and that were used. In other words, these are specimens that were sent out on loans, and so these are trackable through loans if the loans are linked to this project. Here's the specimens that are contributed. These are tracked through accessions, so only if the accession has the project will these show up here on this page. Again, this is done automatically as long as you link the accession or the loan to the project. Arctos will track these numbers for you, which is I find very helpful. And then, of course, these are the projects that use the contributed specimens. So we've used them for educational projects, for other types of loans and studies. So that's projects. Excuse me, that's accessions. Now I'd like to show you what I do with loans. And loans, this is the loan page, which you get to under transactions as well, except it's create loan. So I'm going to create a new loan here. I'm going to create another DGR mammal loan. Again, I'm going to let Arctos tell me what the next loan number is. And just going to put this as authorized by our curator. And just make it out to him. And I put myself as the in-house contact so that I can track everything, all the loans that I've done. And outside contact, maybe you're shipping it to somebody else. So we'll put John's name here. And this loan is going to be consumable because it's a tissue loan. The status could be opened or closed. And the open means that you'll get a notification in the future, and if it's, just to let you know that it's still open. If it's closed, means that I'm saying that nothing further is going to happen with this. Get today's date, some text, and create this loan. And when I do that, now I have all this information, and I have the ability now to add a project. If you type in some information under description, then, and I save these edits, it's going to show over here under this project page. So the loans form is very nice because it gives you a chance to create your own project right here. You don't have to go and create the project separately under the projects page. So I can create a brand new one if I want to. I'll create one myself, or I can link to one up here. So let's say I want to link to the BCP project earlier. I can type in BCP here and say link to that one. Or I can create my own here. I'm just going to link this one here. Anyway, if you create your own project, and this is a test, I then click this button, click to create project with save, and I'll save that here. And then now I have test project, and I can go in here and edit it and add agents, add information, but my loan is now linked directly to that. The other thing that I can do, as I said a minute ago, is I can add an existing project from the same page. I put BCP here and save. Now I have both of those projects associated with this loan. And if I go to the BCP project and I scroll down, I should have my, let's see, these are publications. We did a lot here. Loans. The last loan I just did should be, well, for mammals, DGR mammals, somewhere up here. Anyway, it should be in this list. So that's how adding those work. And I find it, like I say, extremely useful to have, as I make a loan or as I make an accession, to link those projects, and then for everything else then follows. Any questions up to that point? I think the one other comment that I wanted to make on this before I open it up for questions or demos or anything else anybody wants is to say that when you do look at a project, it's really important to view it when you're logged out, because if you log into a project, if you're logged in as an operator like I am here, I'm only going to see the details for those collections that I have access to as an operator. But coming in as a public user, I would see all the collections. And the other thing that's important is that when you, let's go here to the detail page. When you look at these categories, so specimens used, specimens contributed, projects contributing, and projects using, the way these numbers come from, I just want to reiterate, is because these specimens the loans for these specimens were associated with this project, and the accessions for these specimens were associated with this project. If you do that, it automatically updates the project page. Okay, so any questions?
That was great, Mariel. I want to, while you're talking about the specimens used versus contributed, I just want to circle back and reiterate what Michelle mentioned at the end of her section on. So that this is a key reason why we have something called data loans, is so that you could have those show up on the specimens used portion.
Right, and I just had to deal with that the other day, where I had an accession where some of the individuals were used by a particular project, and some weren't out of the accessions, or some were contributed. And so depending on, you may want to create a data loan so that you can isolate specimens out of an accession or loan that specifically relate to a particular project, so that you're not mixing groups of specimens.
Let me add one thing here too, is another way you can use projects is if you're working with an agency, for example. We have a project that's all of our national park service material, right? So anything that's collected in a national park, all those specimens are included in a project, and that way, you know, when you're doing an MOU or something with an agency, and they want to know what all you have, you can just take that project as opposed to doing other searches and trying to pull stuff from here and there. So you can use it to consolidate, you know, different subsets of your specimen data to provide to agencies or funders or whatever.
Thanks, John. I also was curious on the wolf project page that you were showing, Mariel, there's a taxonomy section at the bottom, and I've never seen that on a project, so I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, so all of the specimens in this project are Mexican wolves, which is a subspecies of the Canis lupus bailey. If you click this link, it takes you into the taxonomy page, and which is also accessed here if you wanted to search taxonomy, and you could search on Canis lupus bailey, but that link takes you to the same page. You can search on taxonomy. This gives you, let's see, fuzzy matches, non-classification data. We have media here, we have synonyms, etc., and the classification of this taxon. This is the Arctos classification. Arctos can also use displayed, or you could choose different classifications, GBIF or ITIS or NCBI, et cetera, to use with a particular taxon of interest. So that's just a link from the project page to the taxonomy page, which is editable.
Cool. Well, thank you, Mariel and John and Michelle. I turned on everybody's microphones. If you would like to speak, you probably need to click on the little microphone icon in your top bar to make it green before we can hear you. But if anybody has any questions or comments, there's lots of other Arctos people in the audience today. So if you have something you'd like to share about projects, publications, citations, now is the time. I'll follow up on my own question. So, Mariel, if I were to go to the Mexican wolf taxonomy page, could I link back to this project or other projects that, like, does the connection work both ways?
That contain Mexican wolves? Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Let me see, actually, that's a good question. Go down to the bottom here. External links, but I'm not seeing a link back to the project page, but that would be actually a good suggestion to create a link there. Be useful to know all the projects that dealt with this taxon.
I think we just made a wish list item issue there. We should add that to the Arctos wish list.
Dusty's going
And we do
to
have-
make us stop having webinars.
Yeah, these are definitely creating good ideas. So you can link, however, to specimens currently identified as Canis lupus, so you could get a list of all the specimens from here, and anything that's georeferenced you could see through Berkeley Mapper. So we could map where all of the Mexican wool samples that are georeferenced in our collection.
Yeah, except most of them are zoo samples.
Well, I mean, we do have some that are georeferenced,
Yeah.
though, even the zoo ones as well. Let's see if that comes up here in a second with our lovely internet. And one of the things that I want to say, since we're sitting here, is that this is one of our favorite examples because at the University of New Mexico, the Mexican wolf is our mascot. It's Lobo. We're the Lobos at the UNM. That's our football team, etc. So I like to use this when we're talking to students and administrators, etc., as an example. The problem is that if you search on the common name Lobo, you get all kinds of things, including plants and sea lions and all kinds of various organisms. So, but you can put common names into Arctos and get them out. But we're trying to come up with a good way to use this in education and outreach, to use common names where perhaps you could specify specifically that you're looking for a wolf and not a plant. So we're not looking for that map from here. Let's see, specimens identified.
Does anyone else
Any other
have
questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Carla.
So, I have a question, but I can wait. So I'm curious on why it shows up, getting to Erica's question, on Mariel's wolf project, but not on some other projects. Is that something that you did, or how does that actually happen? Do we know? Like if you go to the Death Valley one, I mean, there's lots of taxonomy associated with it, but it's not showing up on the project page.
I don't think
Go to
it's
the
on
edit project. Go into
for
the
wolf.
edit. Yeah, and see if I can't remember
Not a
when that was
unique
in.
thing to the wolf project.
Let's see.
Question, and how does
Right, so we're looking to see if the operator added the taxonomy or if Arctos adds it automatically.
I think I may have added this one actually. Thinking about it in retrospect. So yes, you can manually add taxon names to a project.
Oh, I know, because you associated it with the taxonomy. Maybe that's how you did it when you created the project.
Right.
Go down to the project at the
You
base.
see now?
Yeah, you have to add it in manually for that to show up.
Can you see it on the
It
screen right now?
Yeah, it doesn't happen automatically. But if you want it to be associated with a specific taxon.
Right, so it gets back to Carol's question where you have to actually relate it to the taxonomy in order for it to show up there.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah. Yeah,
So
and
in You link the project to an accession, you link the project to a loan, you can also link the project to a taxon name, and all that will show up through the project page.
I mean, that would actually probably be a pretty easy thing to automate, actually. If you've got, at least whatever specimens are linked to that project, you could list that taxonomy as well. Dusty could.
Anybody putting this in notes for Dusty for our GitHub issues site? We need to add another issue.
Yeah, actually that would be really valuable, especially for the type specimens. Maybe not for every single kind of project, but if you could choose, to which taxonomies you want to have linked, and then just have like an automatic list of them based on your specimens.
Carol has another, or go ahead, Carla, but then let's go to Carol after you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, otherwise it could get really long list if you have, But anyway, go ahead.
Carol, what's your question? Yes.
Carol, we can hear you.
Okay. So, sorry, I ran in and out for a second while Michelle was talking, so maybe I missed this, but I just wanted to clarify. So, if I have an accession where I have a bunch of amphibians and reptiles, okay, and then I have several publications, the publications are only associated with some of the specimens within those accessions, then I can make a data loan and associate the publications with the data loan, and then they would only be associated with part of those specimens from that accession. Is that right?
Well, in that case, I would actually just associate the specimens you want to have associated with the publications.
Okay.
So skip the project part and just go straight to citation.
Yeah, I already made an accession for this, and I made a basically I want to have 5 different projects associated with one accession, but I don't want to have all the specimens for the entire accession associated with each project. So, I don't know, maybe...
Well, do you have publications? So you have separate
publications associated with each one of these projects too, yeah.
Right.
So you would associate the project with the data loan and not with the accession in that case?
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Or with the publication.
Yeah, I could do it. I don't know if every single one of them has a publication, but it's the stuff that comes from, it's Mount St. Helens post-eruption. I have all these amphibians, and they were associated with all these different little projects, and then some of them have publications and some don't. So,
yeah, so data loans do sound appropriate.
Right, because originally what I was going to do is I had one big accession, which I like having that because it came in from one person, and I was thinking I needed to split it up into like 5 different accessions associated with the different, but I think a data loan might be better, so. Okay, I'll talk with you more, Michelle, since obviously you're in the office next to me, but this might be something that other people have an issue where they have like, yeah, a lot of accessions and then only a lot of specimens in one accession, but only some of those specimens are associated with the actual publication, which you can put in citations, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think partly it's a matter of also just practicality and workflow, so you're probably dealing with it as a single accession since it's a single origin or a single, agency, and there's related permits that are all kind of related to that, accepting of a new batch of specimens. And then if there are specific projects that may be a little bit more detailed oriented in terms of like a specific region or a specific focus question, a research question study, then a data loan would be the way to separate out that accession to just the relevant specimens that you want to have linked. But there's lots of different ways, right? Maybe your data flow works a little bit differently and you're actually accessioning them in batches. So that then maybe separate accessions make sense. So it's a little bit of a workflow issue, whatever works best for you. But Arctos has the flexibility to accommodate both kinds of scenarios.
Okay, thanks.
That's a great question. If anyone else has any questions, you could type them in the chat. Otherwise, I want to remind people to please take our post-webinar survey. I put the link in the chat. I'm also going to put a link for the Arctos website where you can see the recording of this webinar in a few days, and you can also see the announcement for our next webinar, which will be on Tuesday, January 9th. That'll be Emily Breaker from CU presenting on data bulk loading, along with Teresa Mayfield from University of Texas, El Paso. So unless anybody has any other questions, big thanks to John and Mariel and Michelle. I think Mariel is our #1 webinar contributor at this point, so extra thanks to her.